The 5 things you must understand before carrying a concealed gun. Every law-abiding American has the right to defend themselves and their family, and I'll always stand behind the Second Amendment. But carrying a firearm in public isn't just a right, it's a tremendous responsibility. I'm Steve from Martell Training Group, retired New Jersey State Trooper, former paramedic, firearms instructor, and author of Defend Confidently. Today I'm giving you the 5 things you must understand before carrying concealed, whether you live in Texas, Florida, or here in New Jersey. Here's the truth. Even if you've been around guns your whole life, even if you hunt, even if you're great at the range, none of that prepares you for carrying a loaded firearm in public under stress around real people with real consequences. For example, very few civilians have ever had to retain a gun during a fight, make a split-second decision about lethal force, or face legal and emotional fallout afterward. Carrying is its own skill set, and only a few people, like law enforcement, military, or armed security, ever truly get experience with it. For everyone else, there is a learning curve that you cannot ignore. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, just that there are considerations you need to take into account. Here are the 5 things you must understand before you carry concealed. Number 1, training. You have the right, but you also have the duty. Every American has the right to self-defense, but we also have the duty to train because a gun that you cannot control is a gun someone else can take. And the last thing you want is for someone to get your gun, a gun that they wouldn't otherwise have, and use it against you or someone else. Carrying requires certain skills, such as weapon retention, hand-to-hand options before lethal force, decision-making under stress, knowing your draw stroke under stress, understanding how it feels to fight while protecting your firearm. Because here's the reality, folks. Every fight you get into now has a gun involved, at least one, yours. As I mentioned previously, if the attacker gets their hands on your firearm and you have no retention skills, they're now armed and you're in danger, and so are the people around you. And if you live somewhere like New Jersey, you already know there are certain training requirements such as qualification every 2 years and knowing the use of force laws, getting instruction on them every 2 years. New Jersey is strict and anything involving a firearm is scrutinized heavily. But this should be the bare minimum. Training is not something you do once. Training is the maintenance plan for the responsibility that you've accepted. Number 2, know the law. Rights come with boundaries. Every American has the right to keep and bear arms, but every state defines the responsible use of that gun differently. Let's talk about stand your ground because it's one of the most misunderstood concepts in our entire community, in my opinion. Stand your ground does not mean you can escalate the situation or that you can skip de-escalation. It also doesn't mean that you can automatically shoot someone just because they hit you or they were a threat at one point. More on that in a minute. It also doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be protected in court. This is not legal advice. I am not an attorney, but all it means is in every state has different statutes. You need to read them and understand them, but it means in general that under certain circumstances, you don't have a legal duty to retreat before defending yourself or using lethal force if you've determined that that's required in that situation. But that's only if you're not the aggressor, and only if the threat is still imminent, and only if deadly force is still justified. Let me give you an example that I cover in my online course. I've also done a video on this case. I'll put a link in the description if you haven't seen it yet. The Michael Drake case out of Florida. Initially, he claimed stand your ground and wasn't charged. Later, he was charged, tried, and convicted because once the attacker stepped back and retreated, the threat changed. He still fired, and that crossed the line. He may have been justified in drawing his firearm since he was pushed to the ground, and he may have felt threatened. But once his attacker saw the gun, he turned to walk away, and he was shot anyway. So a little bit more about New Jersey. We do not have a stand your ground law in New Jersey. So when you're in public and you feel you have to defend yourself, when using lethal force, for example, your firearm, If you can retreat with complete safety, you must do so prior to using lethal force. So let me repeat that. If you can retreat with complete safety, you know you can do that, you must do so. Now, every situation is different, and you will be judged on your actions prior to, during, and after the incident. The law is extremely strict, and misuse of your firearm, even showing it or brandishing, can lead to criminal charges. The Second Amendment gives you the right, but understanding the law gives you the chance to keep that right. Number 3, legal and financial reality. You have a right, but you will be held accountable. Even a righteous self-defense shooting can turn your life upside down. Here's what most new carriers don't know. If you defend yourself with a firearm, you will likely have your gun seized, be detained or arrested, be questioned for hours, need to call 911 immediately after the incident, need to say very little until your attorney arrives, of course have an attorney, face a potential civil lawsuit from the attacker or their family, experience 1 to 2 years of legal stress. This is true everywhere in America. And if you live in New Jersey, right now, if you live in New Jersey, you cannot, to my knowledge, this is still true, get a policy written for self-defense liability insurance for firearms. That means that you cannot buy the same insurance protection that residents in other states use to cover legal defense and civil liability. This was a law signed by Governor Murphy some years ago. He later signed an executive order reversing it, since his new, what I like to call, anti-carry law required getting insurance. Liability insurance, that is. That part has been struck down, of course. However, even though we signed that executive order reversing it, insurance carriers have not yet begun to offer liability policies in New Jersey for self-defense. I don't know if that will change. I'm sure the carriers are concerned about lawsuits and not following the original law that Murphy signed a while back, because it's still on the books as far as I know. Even with all that in mind, you absolutely have a right to save your own life, the life of your family, but once that trigger is pulled, you just need to know that the legal system will take over, and you must be ready for that responsibility. Number 4, the emotional and moral weight. A right that changes your life forever. The fourth thing you must understand before carrying concealed is the emotional and moral impact of using deadly force. Even if you had no choice, even if you saved your life or your family's life, you will feel the weight of that decision. People imagine using a firearm in self-defense like an action movie. But afterward, the real challenges begin. You can experience stress, anxiety, sleepless nights, second guessing, relationship strain, especially with family members who didn't want you carrying in the first place, moral or religious conflicts, media or social media attention. And here's something people forget. Your social media history will be examined. Everything you've posted, every sarcastic comment, every tough guy meme you've shared. That can all end up in a courtroom. I did a video on an Army sergeant who says he fired in self-defense at a protester who approached his vehicle holding a rifle. Police initially didn't charge him and thought it was a justified self-defense shooting. However, the prosecutor's office found social media posts he made in the past 2 years. I think they went back 2 to 3 years, indicating his dislike for protesters and that he may have to, quote, shoot some on his way to work. I'll put a link in the description for that video if you haven't seen it. And while we do have the First Amendment, which allows free speech, just know that it can and will be used against you if a prosecutor is trying to paint a picture that you were looking for a fight. I think many people don't think about or realize that everyone has a right to free speech, but that doesn't mean you're free from the consequences of that speech, whether you lose a job, a friend, or you're convicted in court because you've convinced a jury that you're guilty from your posts. The bottom line is that carrying a gun means accepting the emotional weight of protecting your life and the emotional consequences afterward. Using a gun, even 100% justified, will change you. Now, how much depends on your personality, your training, and your experiences. I believe the right to protect your family is sacred, but so is the responsibility to understand what follows after you survive the worst day of your life. Number 5, can you actually fight with a gun? Now, the last thing you need to understand before carrying a firearm is this: can you actually fight with your gun? And I don't mean shooting at the range. I mean fighting with it on your body, either in the holster or at arm's length while someone is trying to hurt you. Remember, most attacks happen at that 3 to 5 yard range, pretty close. A lot start out as simple assaults, not immediately as deadly force situations. Some do immediately start off as deadly force, but a lot don't. And remember, especially in states like New Jersey, brandishing is a crime. You can't expose your gun or draw it to intimidate someone. You can only draw when you genuinely believe you're facing imminent death or serious bodily injury. That's why weapon retention is so important. If someone grabs for your firearm and you don't have the training to control it, that gun now belongs to them, and you and the people around you are in even greater danger. So before you carry, you must ask yourself, can I retain my weapon during a struggle? Can I protect my firearm from being taken? Can I defend myself without going immediately to lethal force? Can I de-escalate when the threat changes? Do I have any hand-to-hand skills at all? A firearm is the last resort, not step one. Your right to carry comes with the responsibility to control that firearm every second you're wearing it. And if you've never had weapon retention training, you'll be amazed at how difficult it is for most people to keep that gun in the holster when someone is trying to take it from you. Now, more on the fighting part, we need to address something that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. Every situation is different, and you will be judged not only on what happened, but on who you are, your training, your experiences, and what a reasonable person would do in your circumstances. So let me give you an example. If you're a 75-year-old woman weighing 110 pounds and you're being threatened or physically attacked by a 25-year-old man who weighs 250 pounds, no reasonable person is going to expect that you square up and start physically fighting him first. In that situation, a reasonable person would absolutely believe you are in imminent fear of serious bodily injury or death. In that case, you may be completely justified in drawing your firearm to defend yourself. Now compare that to two men of similar size and strength getting into an argument. One starts the fight, begins losing, and suddenly flashes his gun to intimidate the other guy. Two completely different situations, two completely different legal outcomes. One is self-defense, the other is a crime. This is why context matters. Your background matters. Your size, age, health, mobility, all of it will be considered. Your training and decision making will also be examined afterward. And this brings us full circle. Carrying a firearm means taking responsibility for every choice leading up to that moment and being prepared to articulate why your actions were reasonable based on your circumstances. At the end of the day, you absolutely have the right to protect yourself. You absolutely have a right to defend your family. And you absolutely have the right to exercise your Second Amendment freedoms. But rights come with responsibilities. Carrying a firearm means living in what I call condition responsible. Every minute, every decision, every interaction. The right to carry is a gift. The responsibility to carry well is a duty. So, before you carry, master these 5 realities: training, law, legal consequences, emotional weight, fighting ability. Because the pressure of carrying isn't just on your belt, it's on your mind, your character, and your judgment. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to the tools you need to survive. But rights come hand in hand with responsibility, training, legal knowledge, and discipline. If you want to dive deeper, check out my book and online course. The links are below in the description. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay trained, and as always, stay aware.